I will deliver my presentation in English.
First of all, let me apologize on behalf of President Hoyer, who wanted to be here but had to cancel for medical reasons. Let me also thank the Italian government for organizing today's event and for bringing us together. This is an important milestone in the support that Italy and the European Union are providing to Ukraine. Thanks to our hosts for their commitment at international level, but also through concrete military, economic, and humanitarian support. As the European Union Bank, the European Investment Bank has been active in Ukraine since 2007. We have provided the Ukrainian government with more than 7 billion euro of financing, making the EIB one of the largest multilateral lenders in the country. We stepped up the activities in Ukraine after Russia occupied the part of eastern Ukraine and annexed Crimea in 2014. In concrete terms, it means resources to finance over 200 projects to help renovate and repair critical infrastructure facilities in cities across the country, to assist people who had fled the conflict and the towns that accepted large number of refugees. Our work has continued throughout the current war. After the first Russian tanks rolled across the border and the full-fledged invasion started last year, we took all possible steps to support the economy of the country during the last 14 months, focusing on clearly identified investment projects with high social returns that provide immediate economic impact. We moved fast, we will not slow down. It's much more than a moral imperative to stand side by side with Ukraine, not just with weapons and ammunition, but also through material support to a very resilient economy and population that keeps on working, producing, making Ukraine's resistance possible. This is what we do best, and it will be our form of solidarity with the Ukrainian people and our commitment to supporting an independent Ukraine and to improving the lives of these people. Whatever we do today to support the economy will ease the reconstruction efforts later. In full coordination with the Ukrainian government and fellow IFIs, we are financing projects in fundamental areas of the economy: energy, roads, and railways. Areas that are also crucial for a swift integration with the European Union. Many schools, hospitals, and social housing units we financed have already been completed in the last 12 months. Many more will be opened this year, and all this was possible due to a close cooperation with the Ukrainian government, the European Commission, and with our shareholders, including Italy. Now it's time for us all to scale up further support. The most recent rapid damage and needs assessment carried out by the Ukrainian government in coordination with the European Union, the UN, and the World Bank estimated that $14 billion are needed to meet the most urgent implementation priorities that shall be addressed in 2023. I would like to draw your attention to this. It concerns investments that are most urgent and cannot wait until the war is over or until a comprehensive solution for the construction of Ukraine is put in place. We all must address these needs now. And to those that criticize investing in the reconstruction now, while hostilities are still shaking the country, we reply that it's critical to support the economy and the population to avoid greater losses and damages. We are therefore working with Ukrainian authorities on a strong pipeline supporting public services and the recovery of the real economy for a total of €2 billion. The EIB has unparalleled experience in implementing infrastructure projects and we will work soon to turn these projects into improved living conditions for the people in the country. Projects like the extension and modernization of the hospitals of Kiev and Odessa, the new nationwide emergency call system, schools, education facilities, and other public buildings in Dnipro, Sumy, and Zaporizhzhia. The restoration of tens of bridges and hundreds of kilometers of roads and railroads to expand the capacity of the public transport system within cities and across the country through the main logistical corridors. Drinking water and sewage reconstruction across the country. And finally, important resources to ensure that the private sector of Ukraine continues to thrive. This will be possible thanks to risk-sharing instruments to local banks in Ukraine to support SMEs and equity funds, making sure foreign direct investment, like the one of the Italian government is promoting in this conference, continue to flow to Ukraine. In order to make these essential projects a reality as soon as possible, the member states of the European Union have recently approved the setting up of a new trust fund allowing the EIB to finance this pipeline of projects. It works providing partial guarantees for EIB loans as well as concessional lending and impact finance. It will thus provide a bridge solution enabling the EIB to continue to finance urgent and critical projects under the EU banner until a more permanent solution can be found. We are now working with the European Commission and all potential donors to make this operational. To speed up project implementation and increase impact, our shareholders also approved 100 million euro of EIB technical assistance. This last point in particular is a visible testament of the EIB commitment to the long-lasting reconstruction in Ukraine. Such a big technical assistance envelope will help local authorities to map needs, plan expenses, and design the best projects to be rolled out according to the country's needs. All the projects I mentioned will not just support Ukraine's resilience today in the face of Russian aggression, but they will literally pave the way for the country's EU membership, as we know from previous experience with the new countries joining the European Union. With our experience of the integration of Eastern economies into the EU single market, at the EIB we know very well how we can quickly ensure the condition for the economy to thrive. That's why we will work with the European Commission to deploy even more resources in the medium term with the support of the European Union budget. EIB activities in Ukraine in the coming months will be complementary and additional to the European Union macrofinancial assistance of which Italy has been a stronger supporter. We are also ready to work with our Italian partners on supporting sectors and projects of mutual importance, from energy infrastructure, resilience and energy efficiency, to municipal infrastructure, agriculture, transport, construction, and many others. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I ask you to please stick to the time allotted, that is to say 3 to 4 minutes, in order to allow everyone to express the priorities of the different international financial institutions. The floor to the Vice President for Europe and Central Asia, Antonella Bassani. Good morning. I wish to thank the Italian government for inviting me and my colleagues from the World Bank to attend this important event. And at this point, I will continue in English.
The humanitarian tragedy after Russian invasion of Ukraine has entered its second year. The war has caused devastating consequences. The Ukrainian gross domestic product shrunk by about 30% in 2022. Over 8 million people are displaced across Europe. 5.5 million people are internally displaced in Ukraine. By World Bank calculations, poverty is estimated to have increased to 24% of the total Ukrainian population in 2022, pushing an additional 7 million people into poverty. And the repercussions for the global economy have been huge, ranging from increased food, fuel, and fertilizer prices to trade disruptions. I am grateful for the confidence and trust that the Ukrainian government have placed on the World Bank Group as its partners. And many of our partners are with us today, and I'd like to thank you too for your contribution and support for Ukraine. The World Bank has been one of the first and a steadfast responder with economic support to Ukraine after the war started. The first of our support was approved by our board just 11 days after the invasion. Since then, our support has focused on three main areas. First, the World Bank has mobilized over $22 billion in emergency financing, including grants, guarantees, and linked parallel financing from many of my colleagues here today. This includes about $3.4 billion of World Bank own resources, with another $6.5 billion of World Bank resources planned over the next 1 year. And this support has enabled the government of Ukraine to provide essential government services, pay wages and salaries and pensions, keep schools and hospitals open, and assist internally displaced citizens. And this support has reached more than 13 million Ukrainians during the last year. Second, the World Bank is supporting the government as it implements critical reforms even during this time of war, including fiduciary, procurement, anti-corruption, and sectoral reforms that can strengthen Ukraine's ability to attract and absorb both public and private funds, as well as set the ground for the future of the country. And third, the World Bank has supported the government in preparing the updated rapid damage and needs assessment in partnership with the European Union and the UN. This report showed that in the first year of the war, total direct damages amounted to $135 billion, and the reconstruction and recovery needs are estimated at $411 billion over the next 10 years. But the focus at this time is on the priority critical expenditure in the year 2023, this year. This totaled to about $14 billion for the next 10 months. Of these, more than 60% are for transport, energy, and housing. And beyond public infrastructure, a critical part of the recovery program is to support and sustain and catalyze the recovery of the private sector, which must begin immediately to ensure a sustainable economy, and my colleague from the International Finance Corporation will speak next on that. So the government has already taken steps in its 2023 budget to meet around $3 billion of these reconstruction and recovery needs, and we are helping the government to mobilize the remaining $11 billion, including $6 billion in unfunded budget needs, $3.3 billion in financing to support state-owned enterprises in energy and transport, and about $1.5 billion in non-budget financing to catalyze private investment. The World Bank is supporting the government and working with various countries and institutions to mobilize this financing for urgent recovery needs in the next 10 months and to ensure that this financing is deployed rapidly and reaches the intended beneficiaries. I know the task ahead for Ukraine recovery and reconstruction is huge, but the World Bank will be there, together with all of Ukraine's partners, to bring our global expertise and financial support the country needs to overcome this dark time. We will be able to succeed if we leverage the complementarities of our roles, the Ukrainian government, the Italian government, and other donor countries and institutions, and the private sector. Thank you, and Slava Ukraini!
Grazie.
Thank you. Now, the floor to the Vice President of the IFC, Susan Lund. Please, you have the floor. And once again, I ask you to please stick to your time allotted between 3 and 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellencies. I'm grateful for the government of Italy to bring us together today to talk about how to support Ukraine's construction in collaboration between the private sector and the public sector. The International Finance Corporation, IFC, is the arm of the World Bank Group that invests in companies around the world to support private sector development. We work with governments on structuring public-private partnerships, and we work across the capital stack, investing in all forms of debt, mezzanine finance, and equity in our target projects. IFC is the largest development finance institution in the world that focuses solely on the private sector. You've heard this morning already about the enormity of the challenge in reconstruction in Ukraine. Estimates most recently put together by the World Bank, the European Commission, the United Nations, estimate that the reconstruction and recovery so far in the war will be over $400 billion. The Kyiv School of Economics estimates that $25 billion will be needed just for the private sector. And of course, the war is still going on. Before the war, the private sector generated as much as 70% of GDP in Ukraine. And it's a lifeline for jobs, for exports, and for generating tax revenue for the government. I'm proud to say that IFC has a large portfolio in Ukraine that we continue to commit to. We have roughly $400 million in commitments in Ukraine, about half of which were new commitments that we've made since the war began. We're supporting companies in agriculture, in digital technologies and IT service exports, and we're providing trade finance to banks to allow the importation of critical goods and services. We recently signed the New Horizon Fund to invest in startups that provide employment in Ukraine and allow programmers and remote workers to serve companies in other countries, thereby generating export revenues. We've also provided nearly $80 million to banks for trade finance, and that figure keeps growing as imports and exports remain critical lifeline to the jobs and people of Ukraine. More recently, we've invested in a large European agricultural company with operations in Ukraine to continue, as is possible, the growing of grains and trading, importing and exporting across the Middle East and Africa. We're very committed to Ukraine's vibrant technology sector, and we see lots of opportunities in supporting both domestic tech startups as well as the telecom infrastructure that supports those startups. In partnership with the European Union, IFC has repurposed a previous trust fund that was investing in construction to repurpose it to refurbish municipal buildings to provide affordable housing for displaced people in Ukraine. We're very active across the construction space, particularly in green construction. IFC not only wants to repair what's been damaged, but build for the future. More recently, we received board approval to invest $2 billion in a new program for Ukraine that we've called the Economic Resilience Action Program. Of that, IFC plans to invest $1 billion of its own account over the next 2 years and bring with it co-investments from corporate partners like yourselves for the other $1 billion. With the help of this program, IFC plans to bring finance from our own account, as well as leveraging donor funds to de-risk some of the projects underway. In addition, we will offer technical assistance to Ukrainian companies and support the alignment with international standards, for instance, ESG standards and Paris alignment, to facilitate more international investment. At the World Bank Group spring meetings just a few weeks ago, we signed our very first donor commitments to provide blended concessional finance for private sector investments in Ukraine. And we're grateful for $43 million from the Netherlands and $10 million from the government of Switzerland to support the agriculture sector and alleviate food security concerns. IFC expects to be able to leverage these and other contributions from donor governments and entities in ways where each dollar of donor funding brings in $3 to $4 of private sector finance. We're very grateful and will continue to work on these programs. The ERA or ERA program offers opportunities for corporate partnerships to help Ukraine overcome the critical challenges and sectors identified by the government as those in urgent need. These include the agribusiness value chain, critical infrastructure and logistics, as well as housing and the tech sector. While the ERA program focuses on keeping the private sector alive during the conflict, we're also preparing for peace and reconstruction. Together with the World Bank and our other development partners that you see here on the stage, we're helping the government of Ukraine prepare a plan to attract private sector investment and start to structure public-private partnerships so that when the fighting ends, those can go out for bidding immediately. In this way, we're complementing the World Bank's efforts to improve and update the regulatory framework to facilitate the reconstruction and recovery. To conclude, I would like to reiterate the importance of keeping Ukraine's private sector alive in these challenging times and to pave the way for a dynamic reconstruction. The private sector has an important role to play in the long-term success of Ukraine's economy. And to do this, IFC will continue to work on our own account as well as with development finance partners and with corporations around the world to help bring progress to Ukraine. We're here in Rome under the auspices of the Multi-Agency Donor Coordination Program for the Reconstruction of Ukraine, which is part of these coordination efforts. As you know, this was created by the G7, and Italy is fully behind the program and will continue it when it assumes the presidency of the G7 next year. I'm delighted to be joined today by IFC's country team, our country officer and our infrastructure officer, as well as our healthcare expert, who I hope you'll have a chance to meet in the sessions this afternoon. We look forward to continuing this fruitful discussion and collaborating with the government of Italy, its vibrant private sector, and other development partners to help us bring recovery and the rebuilding of Ukraine. Thank you.
Molte grazie. Prego adesso di recarsi al podio ed intervenire il vicepresidente del settore.
Now, the Vice President of the Bank Sector of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, Allain, Pilloux.
Buongiorno, sono francese.
Good morning, I'm French, but I will speak in English.
First of all, let me thank very deeply the Italian government for inviting EBRD, and let me give a big hug to our Ukrainian colleagues who are here today. I remember, dear friends, I was in Kiev at the end of October of last year, just after Russia launched a wave of missile and drone strikes on critical energy infrastructure. There were electricity cuts. We spent a lot of time in the parking of our hotel. Of course, this was nothing compared to what ordinary Ukrainians are suffering every day. But the mood was resolute and, of course, somber at that time. I remember the last sentence that President Zelensky told us when he saw us off his office was, "Now we have to get through the winter." And he was right. I was again, friends, last week in Ukraine together with President Odile Renaud-Bassot and our Italian managing director for Ukraine and the region, Matteo Patrone, who is here with me today. The contrast was absolutely striking. The winter is over. The streets are buzzing with life and with cars. But always the same energy, the same determination, the same resilience from everybody we met and, of course, from the population. Our Ukrainian friends are fighting for themselves, for their country, for their freedom, but I just want to remind that they are also fighting for us, for our freedom and for our way of life. Now, the war is far from over, as you know very well. It is causing death, it is causing destructions of assets, displacement of families, of people, and more broadly, it is causing a huge amount of instability. And instability is the enemy of growth, the enemy of investment, the enemy of employment. And our role, all of us here, who are represented and of yourselves, is to restore, together with our Ukrainian friends, as much stability as we can. I must say that the Ukraine authorities and the international community have worked very hard to restore, first of all, some macroeconomic stability. Of course, the huge importance of the IMF program, and Uma will talk about it, of course, the predictable contributions from the EU and from the US in order to fill the Ukrainian budget gap, which is this year estimated at $46 billion, not a negligible amount, but now it is being filled also by other bilateral contributions. And I want to hail the contributions last year of the World Bank and of the EIB, which have been extremely important in terms of budget support. And of course, last but not least, the EU accession process, which is creating for everybody an anticipation of stability in Ukraine. And this is extremely important. But macro stability, dear friends, is not enough. At the same time, the real economy must soldier on, the banks, the companies, the SMEs. Otherwise, it would defeat the purpose of restoring macro stability through the actions that I mentioned. On this is what we have focused upon as far as we are concerned at EBRD last year. We have invested over 2 billion euros into the Ukrainian real economy in the last year. And where have we put the money, more or less, for you to know? $500 million into the gas company in order to purchase gas, so that people can have heating and electricity, because, of course, it also triggers the production of electricity. We have put 500 million euros into the electricity transmission company, cash and also urgent repairs. And we have put 150 million euros with the railways. At the same time, we have done whatever we could in the private sector, through the banks, through our trade facilitation program, to restore import and export transactions. The good news in Ukraine, and I met approximately 10 banks last week in Kiev, is that the banking sector has remained extremely resilient. This is a very good news. So we have acted through the banking sector, but also, of course, directly, in particular in the agribusiness sector and in the pharmaceutical sector. This year, we are going to continue to pay attention, first of all, to vital infrastructure needs. The line with the gas company is still in place. It is a revolving line, so they can use 300 million euros of EBRD money in order to purchase gas again ahead of the winter. In a few weeks, we are going to sign 200 million euros for the railways, and this will focus a lot on border crossing with neighboring countries in order to take the Ukrainian goods out of the country. Roads, we are going to finance the connections between Lviv and Ravaruska, which is one of the roads to Poland, and Lviv and Chernivtsi, which is another connection to Poland. And for that, we have taken money which was already on the table, and we are taking it, for another use. And by the way, we have done that with the EIB, which I want to hail for that. Compared to last year, we will do much more with municipalities, because there has been a lot of destruction, and many municipalities like Dnipro, like Kharkiv, like Khmelnytsky, Kiev and Lviv, but also municipalities on the front line, such as Kherson. With Kherson, we will need to work with the state, with the other municipalities. We can work on our own without even asking for a guarantee from the state, and I'm sure that our friends of the Finance Ministry will appreciate that. And of course, we will step up whatever we can step up in the private sector. First of all, through banks, by providing guarantees to them in order to resume lending to SMEs. Others are doing that as well. It is not enough. We must coalesce with other institutions in order to do more. Secondly, by investing directly, and I want to give you two recent examples. We put 90 million euros in February in MHP, which is the largest chicken producer in Ukraine, so this is a local company, and a few days ago, we signed a 40 million loan in order to resume the operation of Chersanit, which is a Polish company producing ceramics and sanitary ware in the Żytomir region in Poland. Why do I say that? Because there are many companies in this room, and I can tell you one thing. You Italian companies, you are needed for the recovery and the reconstruction of Ukraine. If you want to restart operations, if you want to create operations, if you want to either greenfield or merge or acquire a company, we are at your disposal to serve you extremely quickly, and I'm sure together with IFC, because we are doing a lot together in the private sector. So you are most welcome. It is a collective effort. Let's work together for Ukraine and for its recovery. Thank you very much for your attention.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Pilloux. E ora chiamo...
Thank you very much, Monsieur Pilloux. Now, Carlo Monticelli, Governor of the Development Bank of the Council of Europe. Please try not to speak at length. Thank you very much. And I will take the opportunity to extend a welcome to the Vice President of the Council of Ministers and the Minister for Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation, Antonio Tajani. Welcome, Minister.
Buongiorno.
Good morning.
Italian, and I feel that it's worth paying homage to our language. I will have my interest in our beautiful language, and our guest can benefit from the translation. Buongiorno.
Good morning. First of all, I would like to truly thank the authorities that made this event possible, and of course extended an invitation to the Development Bank of the Council of Europe. It is a very important initiative, an initiative that reinforces the importance of a synergy and a synergetic effect to guarantee cooperation across all the stakeholders, to rise up to this challenge, to support the Ukrainian people that has been ruthlessly attacked. The Development Bank of the Council of Europe is a peculiar institution because it is the only international financial institution whose purpose, whose goal and mission is that of supporting investments in the social sector. So the bank has the opportunity to contribute to the great synergy with the other international financial institutions that are represented here today. Amongst us, there's always been great cooperation, but we must say that the huge challenges that have been posed by the Ukrainian crisis have had a catalyzing effect when it comes to our synergy, to our cooperation, and this cooperation will be further reinforced by cooperating with the Italian businesses and companies that are represented here. The Development Bank of the Council of Europe has not operated directly in Ukraine yet, because this country is not one of our member states. The accession process to a bank is at a pretty advanced stage, though, and it should come to an end pretty soon. Well, application for accession was filed right after the invasion, once again to stress the importance of the social sector in the reconstruction process. But the fact that the Bank of the Council of Europe has not been able to operate directly in Ukraine doesn't mean that we haven't supported the Ukrainian people in this terrible time for them. Last year, the bank devoted 1/3 of its activities, i.e. 1.3 billion euro, to support governments that have welcomed the high number of refugees. We've heard about 8 million refugees. Well, 1/4 have benefited from the support of our bank because we have supported several countries, especially Poland. Poland played the lion's share when it comes to welcoming refugees from Ukraine, but Italy as well. As we know, Italy has many Ukrainians. As soon as Ukraine becomes a member state, we will become operational right away on the field. So we are in close contact with Ukrainian authorities in coordination with some of the institutions that are represented here today. We will invest in the social sector. We will contribute with our expertise and experience in post-conflict settings. Experience that we have gained on the field after the war in former Yugoslavia. Social housing, healthcare, this is the contribution that our bank can give in coordination with all the other stakeholders that are represented here to make sure that the synergetic effect becomes possible, and this is essential to meet this challenge, to rise up to this challenge. So once again, on behalf of the international community, and if you allow me, I will act as a spokesperson here to the Italian authorities that will, this very important initiative, are giving a significant contribution to this synergetic coordination. Thank you very much.
Molte grazie.
Thank you.
Benvenuto.
Welcome. Now the floor to Vice Director Europe from the International Monetary Fund. Please, you have the floor.
Greetings to everyone. First of all, thank you to all the organizers for putting this fantastic event together and bringing so many groups of donors and investors. For over a year, we have seen the war's devastating social and economic impact on Ukraine, including massive damage to its infrastructure. We have also seen the incredible resilience of the Ukrainian people and the authorities' impressive macroeconomic policy response and skillful policy making to address the economic and financial consequences of the war. And we have also seen an unprecedented role of external financing provided by Ukrainian partners. The IMF, for its part, has disbursed $5.4 billion since the start of the war, including a first disbursement of $2.7 billion under the new 4-year extended fund arrangement, which has a total of $15.6 billion over 4 years. This program is part of a larger $115 billion financing package that has been mobilized from donors, comprising grants and concessional financing, as well as flows from debt operations that will be orchestrated during the course of the program. Assurances of such a scale of resources gives the Ukrainian authorities the confidence that they can run core functions of the state while preserving macroeconomic stability. Turning to reconstruction in particular, there are 4 small points that I would want to make, but these are important to remember. Reconstruction requires both public and private sector involvement, and the private sector's appetite to invest will depend on macroeconomic stability as well as the governance reforms that will help achieve a level playing field. And the goals of the IMF program that the Ukrainians reform program that the IMF is supporting will carry forward reforms that will enable such an environment. Reconstruction will also require additional new financing, but it's not just the availability of financing, but the composition or the financing mix is also important. And it is important to therefore make sure that in order for the economic objectives of the country to be maintained, that the reconstruction efforts be prioritized and financed without jeopardizing the macroeconomic stability and particularly the debt sustainability. Which takes me to the third point, which is that the importance of the Ministry of Finance in Ukraine to be involved in these reconstruction projects is very critical in order to ensure that the financing is in appropriate terms and the necessary cost-benefit analyses are done. And the last point is that the capacity to rebuild Ukraine is subject to multiple constraints, and it's not just a matter of financial resources. Progress in strengthening institutions is vital, and this needs to continue, and we, for our part, from the IMF, will support the authorities with in-depth technical assistance, including on public investment management in coordination with all our IFI partners. We look forward to continuing work with the Ukrainian government and the international community to coordinate our collective efforts to ensure strong reconstruction of Ukraine. Thank you.